No,
You sure you're not nervous?
no, I'm
Take a deep,
happy. I've been
take
looking
a,
forward to this.
take a deep breath. Hey, so I've got no sponsors and I've got no intro and I've got no music. I just like talking to cool people. So I got a cool person on today's show, Belisa Vranich, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how I met you and how I connected. I think the first time I saw you was a clip from Jay Frugia on Renegade. And then I saw Mark Cheng, and then I saw a picture with Rudy Reyes, and I'm like, I know all these guys. Who is this chick? And I don't know. Did I just get in a lot of trouble calling you a chick? Not from
No,
you.
no, I
You're,
love Chick.
yeah,
Chick is fine.
right.
Yeah, broad. Yeah.
But broad. Um, we can. We now know approximately how old you are if those, adjectives are cool, and they're cool with me. So, hey, welcome to the No Fear podcast.
Thank you for having me on the No Fear
Yeah,
podcast.
I'm so
Those are
excited.
amazing people. You just named three of my favorite people in the world right there.
How interesting are those? Let's just not talk about you or me. Let's just talk about them. We could fill the show because they're such three different but amazing personalities. Big people.
Big people with big personalities. And I know that Ferrugia's amazing, and you just want to call him Ferrugia because it sounds like a beautiful plate of pasta, Pasta Ferrugia. I love saying Ferrugia. And Jason and Jen are fantastic people. They're my family in LA. And Mark Cheng is just, your rock and roll clinician.
Right.
Who actually fixed my shoulder.
Oh,
And
nice.
Reyes, they broke the mold with that one. He is just the most original cat.
Yeah,
I know.
he's a cat, and he's out there. He's just a trip. When I'm around him, I just like sit back, and it's almost like I'm watching some surreal movie. He's so deep and spiritual and intense. And,
Rudy vision.
Yeah,
it's Rudy vision.
yeah. It is. But let's redirect. Those are our mutual friends, and a lot of people who follow my show know that about a year ago, neck injury that impacted my facial nerve and trigeminal, and I had stenosis, and I'm a 58-year-old beat up combatives guy who missed the golden age of mobility and stability that were like what Mark teaches, or even some of the stuff that Jay's into. And so my warm-ups back in the day, and we'll get to it a little bit later, but you're really connected to MMA and combatives and first responders as well. And they're all fucked up, all of us, anybody who trains that hard. And depending on your generation, like, my warm-up was putting on my gloves, right? And then we would just, let's go light and then beat the shit out of each other. And part of it was also because I was following an intuition I had about designing scenarios in self-defense. I deliberately wouldn't warm up a certain way because in my mind, I'd say you can't warm up in a sudden violent encounter. You don't step into a phone booth and get on your, cape and frickin', do some jumping jacks and come out. And I've paid, well, this is interesting. I couldn't change anything because if I changed how I did stuff, I probably wouldn't have arrived at what I know. But I do tell younger clients and athletes, yeah, fucking warm up. I did the research for you. I know this works. I'm in a lot of pain, and that's how I met you. Is I'm in pain, and there was with my facial nerve, my nervous system. I was in a sympathetic state all the time. Like little sounds would make me flinch and so on and so forth. And so, I started studying your stuff online. I'd heard about you. I read about you. And then of course, knowing people that know you, and you were gracious enough to squeeze me in your busy schedule on an LA trip. And you showed me something, about the diaphragm and the direction it moves and how it moves that I'd never seen or heard or understood before. And I remember telling you, what was that apparatus? It was a strainer? What was it?
Yes, it was a strainer. Exactly. It was a broccoli steamer.
Yeah. So So for those of you like listening to the show, you've got to go buy a broccoli streamer. We should get to Belisa's course, of course. But talk about that a little bit, because, here I am, like 58 years old, been breathing my whole life, right? And then realize, oh my God, my capacity to inhale, but more importantly, to go into a parasympathetic state was ridiculous. And a lot of other stuff that I want you, if you can, talk about, if it's part of the wheelhouse of study, is there was a lot of fascial adhesions from injuries and blows to the ribs and everything that changed. So my exhale is twice as long as it was when I met you, but it wasn't so much from the breathing. I understood the mechanics from working with you, and I practiced the stuff, but I went to see some people, and there were issues with like organs and adhesions and all sorts of crazy shit that I can't describe, but I'm sure I see you nodding and smiling, going, okay. So I'm passing the mic to you. Talk about that. Talk about the strainer, and like, where did you learn that or get that? Because that, to me, I remember being so excited at the time, saying, I hope you're like showing this at every one of your courses, because it was really an epiphany for me.
I mean, I travel with this steamer it's a steamer or a strainer, but it's a kitchen, it's a kitchen thing that I'd never cook broccoli in, but most people do. And I was looking for a visual for the diaphragm, because you have to remember my background is in psychology. So I'm looking to see what people don't understand and why they don't understand it. So I never blame the person not for understanding. It's just that they haven't been given a good analogy. I like being able to see or feel or do something around what I'm trying to learn. So just in a textbook doesn't resonate with me. So the steamer was interesting because it actually looks very much like a diaphragm. At home, if you have a steamer, go get your steamer, and you should turn it upside down. And that's what your diaphragm looks like. And that's actually how the steamer moves, is a lot how the diaphragm moves. We were told when studying anatomy in 5th grade or whatever, or even in medical school, that the diaphragm is like a toilet plunger, which is such an ugly visual, right. But it's also not an accurate visual, because what you want your diaphragm to do on the inhale is expand your rib cage. And I know that sounds terrifically simple, but that's sort of part of who I am, is taking a really complex movement and breaking it down and saying it in such simple terms that you sort of go, well, I thought I knew that. So whenever I have someone say, yeah, that sounds so simple, I thought I knew that, that makes so much sense, I know that I've succeeded. So when you look at the steamer and you pull the edges out, that's the inhale. And what should be happening is that your thoracic cavity should be widening. And on the exhale, your thoracic cavity, or the circumference of your thoracic cavity, should be narrowing. So most of us don't know that. We think that inhale is sort of this posturing with your chest puffed up and your arms to the side and your head up looking towards the clouds. And that could not be further from the truth.
Nice. And most people inhale way high. You'll see even if you tell someone in their stress, hey, take a breath, you always see the chest and the shoulders and the head raise. And so they're chest breathing. And, when you understand, you look at the shape and the size of the lungs, and then you understand the diaphragm, it totally changes everything. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, there's lots of times where and it just feels good.
Yeah.
Right. But if it's all you're doing, you've got a problem with your aerobic capacity and many other things.
Very well said. It's that you don't want to limit yourself to one way of breathing. So you are going to want to be able to breathe with your neck and shoulders. For instance, if you're doing jujitsu, say, and someone has their knee on your chest or on the lower part of your chest, you're going to want to know how to breathe in other directions.
Right.
Depending on what's going on with you, you might want to be breathing behind the shield. You might want to be breathing into your back, which is always funny because people say breathing into your back or your side all the time, and no one really knows what that means. We have to break it down into things you can measure and things you can practice.
Right.
So yes, you should be able to breathe in all different directions. I actually use the description of quadrants. You
Mm-hmm.
should be able to breathe top, right, left, bottom, right, left, and back. You should be able to breathe in all four places. And especially,
Understanding plasticity, mindset, meditation, can people, can your top practitioners or exponents or disciples, can they, like I can flex my right bicep if I want through neuromuscular communication. I don't flex my biceps and then both go. Can you actually direct to the quadrants
yes,
independently?
yes.
Wow.
And you should be able to. So, for instance, especially with first responders, if you're a firefighter and you are on all fours going through a room, you need to be able to breathe in different directions depending on your gear. And your
Mm-hmm.
gear is not always going to be on your body in a, uh, you're going to have rope on
Yeah,
one
yeah,
side.
right.
It's heavy, so you're off balance. You need to be able to breathe to the side and up in all different directions. And it gives you a terrific amount of confidence when you know that even if part of you is being squished between two walls as you move in, that you can still breathe sideways, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
or up if you need to.
I think psychologically, I just visualize that because I'm not a big fan of closed spaces, especially, it was really weird is when the injury happened, I started developing anxiety, and I don't like talking about it, but I like talking about it. But where I'd be in a good mood and everything's good, and I've got anxiety, and I just realized it was my nervous system. And, but then you start thinking about stuff. And so the psychological connection between, I call it intentional breathing because we take breathing for granted. And here I am, I've been doing scenarios, like intense anaerobic scenarios for years. My ability to control my breathing under stress is pretty highly developed. But when I was experienced stress from an unknown specter, like my nervous system was jacked up, that scared me because it wasn't like an opponent I could punch in the face. Right? This is kind of heavy. And the first person that kind of came to my metaphoric rescue is my buddy Brian McKenzie, who you know as well from Art of Breath. And he had me doing some protocols, and within 3 days, my anxiety was under control. I could feel it coming on like a freight train, and then just do some breathing, get it in control. And but it was fucking scary for anyone who's dealing with that stuff, is how powerful also breathing was. And I wrote some stuff about that where I said, we've trained everything else as a martial artist, as a combative, it could be a musician or whatever. We train all this stuff, but most people don't train breathing. And it's not just the muscle, because it's part of your muscle, your lungs, your organs. But you can go X amount of time without food, and you can go X amount of time without water. And the thing that'll change everything really fast is how much oxygen you have. And so it's huge. It's undervalued and underrated. And I liked what you said, and I wanted to throw something in because I did a post today where in my Facebook feed, I was in Australia, and this popped up. It was like 3 years ago, where there was in a shitty gym, and there was a shitty heavy bag there, and the equipment sucked, and I hadn't kicked in years. A lot of people didn't know this in the video. It looked like I don't believe in muscle memory. There isn't any, but it was just the myelinization of decades of training. I stood in front of the bag, I loosened up a little bit, and I ripped some kicks in there. But my post today was about the distinction in your mind between practice and training. Practice is about efficiency, and training is about effectiveness in my mind, just changing those definitions for people. And I'm going to bring this around to breathing and have you talk about this a little bit, because that's why I asked about quadrants and can you do it on purpose? What I realize is like a lot of people don't understand how to focus on just the proprioception and the kinesthetic perception and the doing things as efficiently as you can, meaning, do I really understand this movement? And then, okay, when and how will I use this movement? That's the training. So like Alan Watts, for those of you who don't know him, Google him, but Alan Watts, a great American Zen master, said, if you can't meditate in a boiler room, you just can't meditate. And what he was saying was, like, to go to like a sanctuary where the sound is controlled and the meals are controlled and the atmosphere is controlled, yes, it's still the work of meditating, but that's not real meditating if you live in the real world. You got to be able to control your mind with all the distractions of the real world. So I loved what you said about the first responders and breathing, and that's what I wanted to ask you is, and I love the jiu-jitsu example, because you got somebody who's got their knee on your chest and you're going, oh, I've got a diaphragm breathe. Well, sorry, your diaphragm is like ready to tap out. you better get some brain. So run with that a little bit, because I know like.
Sure. You just gave me so much to run with. I want to start with the injury part of thing, because I think that all of us, we're so invincible in our 20s. And what happens is that, you get into your 30s or your 40s or more, and all the injuries you have kind of come back to haunt you. They'll either creak or groan or, hurt more when it rains or whatever it is that happens to you. But having an injury and getting an injury later on in life, you all of a sudden realize that you're a mere human, and all of a sudden it's not this other thing that you can tackle or you can beat up or you can pin down. And it's really tough for people who, we know just you can muscle through it. If it's uncomfortable, you deal with it. But when it's an injury, it's a completely different part, of your soul and of your history. You've been able to count on your body to do what you want it to, and all of a sudden it's going to do something completely different. It's not listening to you, and now it's going to affect the way you think. So that getting an injury and how you deal with it is a really, really important topic, because everyone will have that moment where all of a sudden their body is not doing what they want, and it's not getting better the way your body used to get better when you were 20, and you just, hey, I'll sleep it off, I'll put some ice on it, maybe I won't even put ice on it, but right, tomorrow I'll be fine and I'll go deadlift again. So injury is super important, and I'm working with a lot of people right now who, if they have an injury or they have an operation coming up, what can I do? So I really believe in injury prep, and that you have a routine for when you get injured. Because you will get depressed if you don't, and your anxiety will go up, and your potential to get depressed will go up because of the injury, especially if your body's been really responsive and good, and you're a good tool, if that's the analogy you use for you, and all of a sudden it's not working. So we can talk more about injury, because again, if you get injured, you need to go to the gym the next day. I pound this home, is that go to the gym the next day. Obviously, do not, take care of yourself. Don't do anything that's going to make the injury worse, but work out the other parts of your body that are okay. So if you have a knee injury or an ankle injury or whatever's going on, you need to go to the gym the next day. Do not stop your routine of going to the gym, and just do back and shoulders, do pecs, do biceps, do triceps. Keep going to the gym, because it's going to keep your endorphins up. It's going to keep you from getting depressed. So the injury topic is tremendously important, because all of us are going to get injured over and over again, given what we do. And it's important to have a plan, really be prepared for injury to happen.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, Jack, I like that idea, because it's always, I remember, especially if you're an athlete, when I got diagnosed with the stenosis and then I had the neck injury a few months later, a lot of people don't realize this, is I have not done an aggressive workout in about a year and a half. All I do is walk. Sometimes if I shadow box and lightly hit a bag in my garage, I can aggravate my neck. And then the next day I've got, 2-3 days of spasm and cramping. And so it's awful. But, I went from, so I'm 58 now, I went, like 50 years of working out every day, doing some sort of movement. And then it stopped cold turkey. And that really impacted me psychologically. I love the idea for everyone, because we got a lot of first responders, military, law enforcement, martial artists listening to this. I love the idea of it's so funny how, because I look at self-defense as holistically, where most people think of self-defense as somebody's trying to do something, but you can look at the type of food you purchase as a form of self-defense, the type of sleep you get as a form of self-defense, and what are you doing to protect yourself and your body. But the idea of having a plan, I never thought about this way, I love it, is if I get injured, which I don't hope to, and I'm not trying to self-fulfill prophesize, that, but this is what I'm going to do immediately, when I'm injured, and this is what I'm going to do the next day, because the likelihood that you will do that by having the plan is much greater. I remember someone really close to me went through a very awful breakup, and it impacted them. I mean, it was one of those things where, okay, this person's like going to be not eating and on the couch, for days. And I sat the person down and I said, everyone goes through this. If you have that last microcell of focus in your brain, go into the gym. And even if you're on the bike crying, get on the fucking bike. And they were able to do that, and it was amazing that how fast they went through this. But all they committed to, no matter what, they weren't eating, they weren't sleeping, but they worked out every day, and it just impacted them. The endorphins, the dopamine, the serotonin, all the shit that the brain does when you're doing what you should be doing, moving, changes everything.
And you said something important, which is too many people think that if I have a plan for this, then I'm attracting that energy for some reason. So it's like residual bullshit from that stupid book, The Secret. I'm sorry if you loved it. Okay.
What? No, I use the same analogy. I go, listen, like, you don't get in car accidents because you put your seatbelt on. Because if that was a law, every time you put your seatbelt on, you get in a car accident. Yeah. It's silly,
I mean, this, I come from a background where it's not survivalist, it's more preparedness, because I have a dad who not only was a refugee, but then he was in the army, and I grew up with, you prepare for things all the time. I mean, and he was constantly sitting me down. They were exhausted by the time my brother came. But for me, they were constantly sitting me down and saying, and I remember actually, you made me remember this I remember sitting in front of him, and he had a candle, and he said, you need to respect fire, but don't fear it. And we would go through all these drills because I was the oldest. And, whether it was, we had chin-up bars all over the house. So you had to do chin-ups. Like, he would just throw you up on the chin-up bar, dealing with fire, dealing with knives. And, we also had 3 refrigerators because he had gone through a lot of, hunger. And we had a garden. We were just ready for all kinds of go down and zombies and all kinds of stuff. But I think it was an amazing way for me to grow up because I now have that mindset. Yeah,
listen, we've been domesticated, and so people don't understand how to survive. We're like the cavalry rush in. We live in a bubble, and I tell people, hey, you're the first responder in your fight. The police are the second responder. But here's the thing, and I want to come back to the breathing because that's you've got an amazing background. But, while you've got the clinical psychology and a whole bunch of other specialties, I would argue philosophically and practically the most important stuff you do is the breathing. Because without the breathing, I always tell people, like, one of the mottos in our Spear system stuff is, if you're scared shitless, unconscious, or dead, you're not going to get to your favorite move. Everyone's talking about, like, well, I would do this if this happened. I go, well, but what if you're unconscious or scared shitless or dead? Right? And so there's Bob Willis, who is a very famous police researcher, author, retired cop now, but he saw me teaching in 1993. And after my seminar and lecture, we were doing these gunfighting drills. He said, you teach the 2 seconds before the fight everyone else teaches. And I go, like that's the shit right there. It's not the stimulus response element that we want. It's the stimulus response. And as a psychologist, this, if somebody calls you up and they're already having a panic attack, that's a problem. To deploy a breathing strategy, you want the pre-contact cue that says, uh-oh, I can feel this happening. I'm starting to visualize this. I'm starting to think this. I need to move now. And that ties us back to if we use injury as a metaphor, not necessarily physical, that if I've got a plan where, hey, I think my hamstring's pulling, let me do another series of sprints and see if it's really pulling. No, it's like, No. And I tell people this is interesting because every victim in violence who lived to tell the tale said they had a bad feeling before their attack. We don't trust intuition. So it's 100% folks said I had, so I asked when I was working a lot with CrossFitters and other, aggressive athletes, functional fitness athletes, I would say to them, did you know before you did that deadlift or that snatch or that you were going to hurt yourself? And if you peel the onion, a lot of them, grabbed the weight, started to move down into position, and they would say, my back feels a little bit off, or I'm a little tight. And that was their body's intuition saying, like to a batter, step off the plate. You're not ready to swing. And we don't, aggressive type A personality athletes have this, no pain, no gain, fuck it. And that's so dangerous. You got to listen to your intuition.
So intuition is also one of those, I'm fascinated by the whole concept of intuition. And when you teach breathing, you teach intuition. So I'll have especially younger folks come in. Now I sound really old, but I'll have folks come in and they don't have, like we had Jiminy Cricket and we had we had all these ideas of your gut, how you felt. And if you're a little bit younger, you have no idea who Jiminy Cricket is. You're letting conscious be your guide, your intuition. People have this concept of it, but especially, if you're in your 20s or younger, you don't even know where your intuition is. If there's no app for it, you just have no clue. You have the jargon for it, but I love how you bring that up of when you're lifting. And the problem that happens, and I love talking about this, is your ego dictating you're moving that weight? Or is your brain saying, okay, I have to motivate myself because I don't want to be a wuss? So you're stuck between these two things where you can't make a decision of you're being slack that day or you're listening to your body because you might get hurt. And the deciding factor should be your breath because it gives you pause. So you say, wait, do I feel right? No, don't feel right. Put it down. Just put it down for a second and make that decision. So it's your breath, taking that half a second and actually being able to turn in and call yourself out on, I'm being too macho, or I'm sorry if I offended someone with macho, but I'm being like too aggressive and not listening.
My audience is very gender fluid, so be careful. They are theys. They are not anything else but they.
I don't, I used the word brotherhood the other day and I was thinking, gosh, am I going to get in trouble because I didn't say sisterhood, but I just meant human beinghood. So I'm glad we're okay with that.
Right, we are. It's interesting because the injury to my neck happened because the person moving my neck wasn't watching my breathing, and I had inhaled as he applied some pressure, and that's I felt it. I knew something was horribly wrong as it happened, but I was in that moment where I couldn't say let go because you're like, when you're when weird shit's happening in your body, there's a part of your brain that's so fascinated, like going, and you can't talk, it's but anyways, that's neither here nor there, but it's everywhere because it was connected to situational awareness and breathing. And I want to throw this in there because, everyone talks about it in my audience, of course, is really dialed into the concept of situational awareness, but guys, and I mean girls when I say guys meaning humans, this is just audio for you guys, but Belisa and I are laughing at how fucking
human guys,
how stupid this is that we actually have this is it okay to say that now? I completely forgot what I was saying, but it was the this idea of the situational awareness is directly linked to self-awareness, and your self-awareness is going to dictate the type of situational awareness, the clarity you have for situational awareness, whether it's lifting. So if I go back to what Belisa said about, ego and pride, and, I'm working out with a friend who just put an extra plate on and I felt like shit, that was a little too much, but I got to keep up. I got asked years ago in a law enforcement survey what they thought were the 3 top causes of injuries to police officers. And I said, well, that's easy. It's ego, ego, and ego. And there, we had, as one of our tenets in creating strategies for the street, I said, don't let ego or pride dictate your next strategy. You need to, but you can't, if you don't realize when you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or any age, because there are old souls, if you don't have the self-awareness to run and control, so it's like whatever glasses or shades I have on is situational awareness. But if I don't know what the anomaly looks like and I can't balance that through instincts and intuition, it doesn't matter that I'm looking at it. If I don't know that I'm an asshole or an egomaniac or a jerk, I can't figure out why I keep hurting myself or why I keep getting in trouble. That's a self-awareness thing. It's not a situational awareness thing. Mm-hmm. Sorry for the rant.
No, great rant. And I'm thinking with intuition, one of the problems, we don't pay enough attention to intuition and our own intuition, is that we never get the reinforcement, or we seldom get the reinforcement that we were right. We always get the reinforcement that we were wrong and we should have listened to our intuition, but not often do you do the right thing because your gut is telling you something, and then later on you say, oh, you have concrete evidence for it having been the right decision.
Right. That's interesting, because we very often go, fuck, I knew that was going to happen to me. And it's like this negative.
Yes.
And so I love whiteboards, and when I'm going over what I call the mental blueprint of violence, and I'm showing people, okay, this is the X, this is where the bad shit happens, this is the bad guy, this is the good guy. And we practice how to get over a headlock, how to jam a double leg, how to disarm a knife or disarm a gun. And I go, that's practicing on the X. Nobody's practicing before the X. What was the pre-contact cue before that? And so I write down stimulus response, and I say, look, action's faster than reaction. In an attack, the attacker is the action. If action's faster than reaction, then by physics, you're always going to be late.
Yes.
It's just impossible. And that doesn't take into account the emotional, psychological time added while your brain's catching up going, are you fucking kidding me? Holy shit, here it goes. So what I write down is I go, stimulus response, how do we improve our position using a formula? And then, so before the first S, which is my cognitive complex motor skill training, when he gets me in a headlock, I'll do this. Well, you're training your brain, you're training your neurotransmitters and the myelinization to let the attack happen. And then you're hoping that your counter works. And in the evidence, if I can hijack this call for a second and talk about self-defense, the evidence, CCTV, helmet cam, body cam, smartphones, the evidence is, if it weren't for the uniforms of our first responders or protectors, in the beginning of a violent scramble, you don't know who the good guy and the bad guy is, because people are just fighting for position. But you don't know, which leads me to this idea that, there wasn't any situational awareness, or that we train where our training is incorrect because we're training our brain. I call it a psychological void. I don't know what to do. And there's, someone target glances your gun, you're a cop. If you've never been taught drills for that subtle target glance, you're not going to move until he grabs your gun like your role player did in training. And we've done a bunch of studies for decades on this to change all this. So what we do on the whiteboard is we write down, we've got stimulus response, S and R. We then write down an S and an S and an S moving to the left of the S. And so our training, we talk about detect and avoid, diffuse and de-escalate. We talk about stimulus, 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 stimulus response. What happens before you have to do that counter to the headlock. And it just changes everyone's. But what we're developing there is you're going to like this, a respect and a relationship for dissonance, intuition, and instincts, what I call the 3 I's. That if I develop drills where I'm going, if every victim of violence who lived to tell the tale said they had a bad feeling, and I've got a bad feeling about this guy, but I'm not doing anything because he hasn't physically started to move to trigger my physical counter, we need to be moving and dancing with our intuition. And I call this choosing safety, which is not to be confused with playing it safe. Choosing safety is like there's no downside to choosing safety, but there's a downside to ignoring your intuition. And then having that moment after where we go, fuck, I knew that guy was going to take a swing at me, or I knew, if we take this back to, the fitness industry, every person who's screwed up their back on a deadlift, when I've talked to them and had this deep dive into this, I go, if I peel the onion, I ask them the why, how, why, almost all of them go, yeah, I kind of knew on that next lift that I was going to hurt myself. And I go, but you still went for it. Right? Like, and that's that internal self-awareness versus situational awareness. Yeah. Okay. I'm now going to take a breath.
Well, you're talking about response. I get people asking me all the time, either how should I be breathing at the gym or how they should be integrating their breath into their movement. And when it comes to self-defense, you have to be able to do all the movements on an inhale and an exhale. And that's something that most folks don't want to hear because they like to think that I'm always going to punch on an exhale. And the fact is, you're not going to wait till you're back at your exhale to punch. You might have to punch on the inhale.
Especially in the street. In the ring, you can manipulate that a little bit because there's a bit of a dance. But I mean, I used to, in a clinch, I'd be in here and I would just tune out and I would just be listening to my sparring partner's breathing. I knew when to fucking hit him. I wasn't looking even at his body. I could hear him breathe. You know this. You can watch a fighter, right? And you can see a little line change between his lips, right? And you go, okay, he's mouth breathing now. Here we go, right? So there were things I understood about this without, having the luxury and good fortune to get trained by you and Brian and other people, where I learned so much more about this stuff. But it's fascinating to me to come full circle is like you can adapt and improve your breathing by doing aerobic and anaerobic exercise. And especially if you add the skill set that you want, but in real life isn't that event, right? So what I learned is that I didn't know how to breathe when I was scared personally from either injury, pain, stress. I knew how to breathe when I was doing my shit, right? And what I learned from you and other people is like we breathe all day. It's not just when we're sparring or grappling or lifting. If you can't return to center because you're freaking out in a car in traffic and you're going to be late for a meeting, like that has more impact on your cortisol and your stress than the workout at the gym.
And your judgment and your sense, your sense of optimism. But again, you can separate those two things. And that's what's actually fascinating about this field is that you can still be upset about your situation, but physiologically you don't have to be upset. Mm-hmm. You can just be intellectual. You can divide those two things so that you're not harming your body with the cortisol, with the adrenaline, with all the negativity that goes along with that situation. I have to go back a second to something.
Yeah, please.
When you are a seasoned fighter, and it's so hard for a seasoned fighter to teach this, is that you can see someone and feel how they breathe. So you know how to strike or when to strike because you can sense their breath. Mm-hmm. And that's why the breath that I teach, which is a horizontal breath, it's the mechanics of it. If you're breathing vertically, you're telegraphing what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. Even if it's a tiny movement, you know this. If you see an up, that there's a movement that's coming afterwards and you adjust for it. So that's what's, with fighting, for instance, is so interesting because it's those little details and who you are on the other side watching it that you see. The lips part, the shoulders move a little bit, or there hasn't been a breath in a while. Or when is that exhale coming? Is it a complete exhale? It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. It's I can remember, getting winded a couple times with people that I knew if they knew I was winded, they would come in for the kill. And I had to pretend to breathe when I couldn't because I was just so locked up. And I can teach it so much better now, but back then it was just intuition, just going, okay, they can't know. Right. And, but it's interesting. Something keeps popping up in my head that I want to talk about because I know we've got a lot of firefighters and cops and military on the call. I love the idea, and I want you guys to connect this back to when I talked about practice versus training. So practice would be like, I have a ritual every morning before I get out of bed. I meditate, and I'm doing, even on guided meditation, I'm doing breathing in the background. I've got brainwave apps going, and I've got some good meditation days. But I'm doing different breathing protocols, what I'm doing there is I'm practicing breathing, and I'm visualizing what my diaphragm's doing. I'm feeling my back hit my mattress. Sometimes I'll put my arms on my rib cage so I can feel the horizontal expansion. So I'm giving myself all these cues, but I don't confuse that with breathing under stress, because I'm in on a Tempur-Pedic mattress with a cozy comforter with a Technogel cooling pillow, and I've got headphones on playing digital music. Like, that's not somebody trying to punch my face in. That's not me trying to rescue somebody in a fire. And so I want you all to come back to what I talked about earlier, and what Belisa said is there's practice and their training. And the way I define it for my clients is practices that understand the efficiency of the proprioception, the kinesthetic perception. Do I understand this movement? And then the training is, when will I need to breathe intentionally in real life in a scenario? Does this work in a scenario? So if you're only singularly, like you go, oh, diaphragm breathing, and you totally change that, and next thing you know, you fall down, you're a firefighter, and a fucking beam falls on your stomach just above your diaphragm. Well, you're fucked if you don't know how to breathe into other areas.
And also, I mean, what you just mentioned was what you just described. It was beautifully described, is that you are looking at the mechanics of your movement. You're trying to engage your diaphragm and make your breath a more efficient breath by using the better part of your lungs. And you're doing it in a very advanced way, in that you're thinking about the breath as 360 degrees, what's called abdominothoracic. So not just your belly moving, but your sides and your back, the middle of your body, where the best part of your lungs are. So the training part of it comes after that.
Mm-hmm.
I have too many people that want to go straight to the training, and they want to, use gadgets to make their training better. And you're just going to strain muscles that are already overused, auxiliary muscles. So once you have the mechanics perfectly, now you train breathing muscles just like you do any other breathing muscle at the gym. And that's the part the beginning's fascinating for me as well, anything to do with breathing. But now you know what muscles you want to train, and now you train them just like any other muscle on your body. Right. So it's not any different because it's breathing and people write songs about it and poems and things. No, you have over 10 pounds of muscle in your body that are meant to breathe. If you're using the right muscles, over 10 pounds, that's a hell of a lot of muscle.
Right.
Is it strong? Do you train it? Because you have to train it separately from your sport. When you end up having strong breathing muscles, it actually is a game changer. So all of a sudden, your endurance changes. Mm-hmm. It gets better. And I've had folks who are bedridden who end up working on their endurance and conditioning when they're bedridden and can't run or row or swim, but they're working on their breathing muscles. And that's the part where the training, sweaty, hard, want to die kind of training comes in.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it was something I had that, my own epiphany after, I don't know if you know my friend Eric Goodman, who created Foundation Training.
Oh.
Yeah. So Eric's really big on the breathing, and we went back and forth, because he was doing mouth breathing, and then I was doing the nose breathing from Brian, and then you do mouth breathing. I mean, you do both, I think, but your emphasis for developing and I want to talk about that a little bit after the differences, but guys, that's to me, when someone says no nose, no mouth, I'm like, so can I only punch you in the face one way, or can I punch you with a Wing Chun punch? Can I punch you with a boxing hook? Can I hit you with a corkscrew punch? Can I hit you with open hand? There's different ways to breathe. There's different ways to hit. And as long as you understand the difference between practice and training, and you find, because you can't mouth breathe while you're boxing, right? That's really dangerous. Even if you just like, even if you're good at it, it's a good way to get your fucking teeth and jaw broken and knocked out. So, you know, you just want to understand the concepts there and don't like lock on to this is my guru and this is the only way. At the end of the day, you need to experiment, with that stuff. But I've noticed with me, with my rehab and healing, and I haven't been able to do, you know, like running. Like a year ago, I tried to go run and my fingers went numb, you know, from the stenosis. I mean, it was crazy, scary shit. And you know, that's when I said maybe I need to go get an MRI. But the you know, where like a few months ago I started running again, like little hills and little like light jogging stuff, but my aerobic capacity doesn't seem to have diminished much. Then, you know, what have I been doing to keep myself in shape? I'm like lying in bed breathing, right? And because all I do, folks, is literally I walk. And don't get any ideas. I can still kick most of your asses, so don't worry. That's called myelinization. There's no muscle memory. But you work a lot with a lot of not just first responders but fighters. How have like the MMA guys and people taken to this information?
So I'm glad that you separate first responders from athletes, because a lot of people like bunching them together. And the fact is that the pressure and the stress and the amount of things that could go wrong when you're a first responder are so different than athletes that I prefer to separate the two, because
Always, it's not even this, yeah.
So thank you for doing that. And with the fighting community, you know, Henry Akins in LA was fantastic in bringing me over there. And he's a Hickson guy. And I remember thanking him for having me out and having me teach at his dojo. And he said, Belisa, this is great because, you know, he trained with Hickson. He said, I have always been trying to answer this question that everyone has on what is Hickson doing and how do I train my breathing? So it's purely selfish, and that I can now.
Yeah. So I've never met him, but I got a good friend of mine, Sean Mosen, who trains under Henry, and said he's a really cerebral, interesting guy. But people remember, I mean, Hickson is, you know, one of the greatest jiu-jitsu guys and fighters in the world. But a lot of people don't realize, like, people who get to that level, he has been meditating and breathing for years. His breath exercises, you know, from that, people remember the video Choke.
Yeah.
But anyways, go ahead with the Henry story. Finish that.
Yeah, no, it was just that was amazing because Henry's the one that brought me over there. And then there was the connection with Hickson and Choke and what that meant. But with martial arts, you can't group them all together. Jiu-jitsu is super fun to teach because it's all over the place. You're on the ground. There's all different ways of striking, and there's recovery. To me, people are finally talking about recovery and active recovery. And I think it was the fight community actually that was, you know, kind of was cutting edge in bringing in recovery, just because they train in such a crazy intense way. Is how do we recover that's not just a day that we do laundry? So how do we actually recover in a way that's adaptive, where we're getting better? It's not just a weight day when you're not fighting, right. And being able to get your heart rate low enough so that you can train again and not overtrain and so on and so forth. So the fight community has been really good to say, yes, I want better endurance. I want to be able to control my energy, not to have an adrenaline dump or get too angry or even be too sedated. You know, that happens in the ring as well, where you're so calm that you're a little bit numb. So you want to be able to have your arousal be right in the middle, so you're not, you know, freaking out and jumping over, you know, and attacking people in the audience, but you still want to be effective and have energy to last the entire time. So with fighting, it's interesting. It depends on what you're coming to me for. And I know that one of the first fighters I worked with was having panic attacks because he was scared of being smothered. And you know this in jiu-jitsu is that all that, and Henry's actually great at smothering. You don't want to be on the bottom with him because he knows body weight like nobody does, is that the fear of having someone's body on your face and smothering you is terrible. And that happens, you know, in different, not in all sports, where the idea that you're not going to be able to breathe and you have to find a pocket of air. How are you going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Or in a position which is tough on your neck, or you have the person's body on your face, it's hard. How do you manage that? How do you find the pocket of air? Where is it? How do you find it consistently? How do you not panic so that you then get even
This
more?
is, I want to inject here because this is for anybody here who might have to defend himself, and anybody here who's a protector who moves towards the danger. I call it the Jack in the Box moment when the bad guy moves, right? So there's a fucking clown in there, and you're cranking, and you're going da 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 da. It doesn't matter how fast you are and what you're trained in. The clown will always pop before you can punch the clown in the face. And I used to actually bring a Jack in the Box to classes, but it just kept getting broken and stuff in transport. But just to explain that to people, that you could be right in front of, that lid with your fingers getting ready to go with the Three Stooges finger jab, and you're going, when it pops, you will always be later. Why? Because action's fast and reaction, the clown moves first. And so when we flinch, we hold our breath. And that's the connection to all of my research, is that if I go, something scares me, I hold my breath. Now, did I flinch on my exhale, or did I flinch on my inhale, or in between? Because that's going to impact, like a scuba diver, how much oxygen do I have if suddenly the bad guy's right on top of me, and now I'm in an anaerobic state, I'm starting to move, but I've really got, 1 second left, before I got to gasp. So the idea of training and practicing, but also doing stuff in different positions. And that's some of the stuff I really like about Brian's work, is focus on recovery during intervals, which I think is really important. So especially as a fighter, where you've got like 1 minute to get your shit together, if you had an emotionally, psychologically, or physically taxing round, you've got that 1 minute. And it's something I heard on a podcast recently. This guy, Dave Meltzer, he talked about a big meditator, and he said that what meditation taught him, and now his thing is, when something triggers him, the first thing he does is, when that's self-awareness, he recognizes, okay, I just got a fear spike. I just got scared. I just got angry. It's how fast can I return to center? And the only way to do that, and the fastest way to do that, is through breathing. There's nothing else. There's nothing else. If your heart rate's fucking going and your mind's going, there's nothing else in the world other than doing some intelligent breath control, and right at that moment, or breathing at that moment to regulate that.
And it could be it could literally be 2 to 4 seconds that you take a breath or two, and you put yourself back in the place that you want to be. So, absolutely. When I train people, I say, at what point did you turn the corner? Because this. You're breathing hard, and then you get a moment where you're like, oh, okay, I'm okay.
Right.
So, and I ask them to write down that moment. We do training, and we watch that moment get faster. And that all comes down to this whole concept of metaboreflex, which is your breathing muscles get tired and they take up oxygen. So if you can train your breathing muscles, they need less oxygen. You won't get tired as quickly. So that feeling of your arms and your legs being really heavy, you can actually train that so that happens later or not at all. And that to me is fascinating, because I always thought, well, that's just natural. It just happens. Your arms and your leg get cementy. You have to stop. But what happens if you train your muscles so that doesn't happen as quickly, or so that moment when you turn the corner comes later on? I mean, that could buy you a few seconds. And especially in your field, a few seconds is the matter of life and death.
It's everything. Yeah, it's really interesting, where I'll go into my garage gym, and I'll be doing some of Eric's foundation work, and I'll maybe sit on my bike. I'll get on my inversion table. I'll get my what do they call it? When you're doing what's the thing where you're working your abs? That roller, the wheel.
The roller thing. I hate that thing. Yeah.
And I'll do that to work on my abs in a controlled way, and but I'm focused on my breathing the whole time. But deliberate. I'm not just like breathing while I'm doing stuff. I actually have several rounds of stuff, some of your exercises, some other stuff, intuitive, where I'm actually just thinking about my breathing. So I'm deliberately working on those muscles. And most of us, if you haven't really been studying breath work, this will be a new idea for you listening to this, because we just assume, like, for example, our idea of working out is, oh, we'll do something aerobic for 17 minutes. And when we're out of breath and sweating, we think that that's the end of it. Well, really, that was just your breathing intensified because of your work capacity, but you're not specifically working on your breathing, which also I want to throw out that, you talked about, is there a way to practice or recognize or celebrate intuition? I know, like, I'm going way back, like a half an hour in time, but I always tell people, you can practice courage and you can practice intuition. You get a feeling about something, you choose safety, and you play that out, because there's going to be no downside to I tell the story, a friend of mine, Carl Paoli, I don't know if you know Carl, movement specialist, gymnast from Spain, lives here, but he grew up in Spain. He got mugged all the time. And so he came to one of my Beer and Bodyguard seminars, and he was telling me, man, I got mugged all my, like, I just knew, like, I'd be walking somewhere and I just knew it was going to happen. I had no fighting skills. So this is great, because we're not teaching people how to fight. We're teaching people how to not fight by understanding instincts and intuition, avoidance and de-escalation. So, he calls me up one day. I'm actually in South America teaching, my phone's on in case of family calls. So it's like $4 a minute. He goes, and he goes, Tony, coach, it's Carl. You're not gonna believe what happened. And I'm going, dude, this is like $4 a minute. Is this important? Oh, you got to hear this. And he was walking to a Starbucks in San Francisco. And as he walked by a guy on the wall, leaning against the wall about 20 feet from the door, he got a bad feeling from the guy that was similar to the feelings he got in Spain before he was going to get mugged. And his whole nervous system changed, his breathing changed, his heart rate, he got the fear spike, right? And so in a 1993 article called Presumed Compliance, you guys can Google it online, I wrote, how you feel affects how you think affects how you feel. Both of them influence how you move. And now we can add how you breathe. And how you breathe is going to influence how you move. And so he's inside and he's freaking out. Like, he's like, he's doing this. He gets his coffee. He doesn't know what to do. And then he remembered I don't know if you ever saw my ATM video on how to devalue yourself. Did you ever see that?
No, I'll look it up now.
Google.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to Google Tony Blauer ATM video. There's 2 of them. But the first one is, remember, bad guys only want your property, body, or life. It's only 3 things. And so if you're an ATM, while this could get really bad and maybe you're going to get kidnapped, tortured, murdered, it's probably just property, because you're at an ATM machine. So you can, logically go, oh, it's probably just this, but it could get worse. So the list is short. And so we talk about the strategy of devaluing. And so he remembers this because he's like freaking out inside the store. He's walking out. And one of the concepts of devaluing is, how do you change what your attacker perceives when they're looking at you? Because bad guys don't want to get caught. They don't want things to take too long, and they don't want to get hurt, and for the most part. And I know there's some contrarian out there that goes, no, fuck you. Shut up. For the most part, statistically, they don't want to get caught. They don't want to get hurt. They don't want it to take too long. They only want 1 of 3 things. So Carl walks out of the store, at the Starbucks. He's got the coffee in his hand. He takes out his phone and he pretends to make a call. And he's still, like, he's at the door. So he's 20 feet away from this guy. And he kind of looks up, and the guy kind of looks at him and looks down. And he still has that feeling like, fuck, this is the feeling. This isn't my normal walking around San Francisco feeling. This is a feeling from like 10 years ago from Spain, right? And so I always tell people, trust your gut, trust your intuition, choose safety. What's the safest you can do? You got to walk by the guy, devalue yourself. So he gets on the phone and he starts screaming into the phone. You tell that motherfucker that when I see him, he's fucking dead. I don't give a fuck. And he's yelling, but he's extended his peripheral vision while he's yelling, holding the coffee. And the guy had stood up off the wall when Carl came out, and he watched him for about 3-4 seconds. And then he kind of slumped and leaned back against the wall. And then Carl intuitively knew it was safe to move. And he walked by. But he calls me up if you can visualize this happening, it takes 3 minutes to tell the story. This thing happened in 20 seconds. But Carl calls me up and he goes, "Oh my God." And then when I saw his body slump and look around, it was like, you told me, like, the bad guy is going to look for another complacent victim. And he says, "Do you think he was going to mug me?" And I answered, "Carl, who cares?" Right? He chose safety. What he did is he practiced intuition and he practiced courage, and he practiced like this like a psychological, like the chess of making a strategic decision, as opposed to, fuck that guy. If he attacks me, I'll take him to the ground. Fuck that guy. If he gets me in a headlock, I know the counter. Right? And it's a fantastic story to exemplify, because Carl is not a fighter. He's a movement gymnastics specialist, and he's about 5'7" and 155 pounds. Like, he's not the fighter, right? And so he was able to use all of this, very, very effectively. So I wanted to tell you all, mini tangent, that you can practice courage and you can practice intuition, and you need to practice your breathing, because you won't get your oxygen to your brain to deploy, to download these strategies if you're fucking hyperventilating, right?
Yes. And I just want to thank you for listening to him, Carl, who I don't know. But one of the things you did is that you added to the algorithm that he got to get stimulus back and information back from you that he did well. Mm-hmm. He actually got to articulate that, which kind of finished the algorithm for him, in that he got positive reinforcement, whereas before he might have thought, well, I did fine, I think, but I don't know, because I don't know what I avoided. I think I avoided something, but you actually helped him be able to finish that circle, that lesson, by validating his experience. So I mean, when you teach your kids, I get that question a lot of, like, how do I teach my kids intuition, especially kids nowadays that are so externally driven? So how do I make my intuition better? How do I get my kids to listen to their intuition? And it's by doing exactly that, where when someone follows their intuition, you give them feedback about it and applaud what normally would have been brushed, under the rug.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's something that I in our trainer development, I talk about that, not in the closing the loop language. And I got to think about that, because I like that a lot. And thank you for recognizing that. Because I could have said to him, if I was macho about this, going, "Dude, don't be a pussy. Just fucking hold your ground. You pay taxes too." Like just walk, just get ready to fucking spear him if he comes off the wall, as opposed to, no, you want to move away from danger at the first moment you intuit danger. And then if you find out that the guy, has Tourette's syndrome and had nothing to do with you, he was just, fucking popping off the wall going, "Motherfucker," and like the fact that you went the other way or did something else, like, you still need to practice choosing safety. And the only way you can choose safety is by trusting your intuition.
Well, I was just thinking about, to go back to fighting, is that ability. You're talking a lot about the ability to recover from a situation, or not let it sort of take you down the river. And I'm thinking about a fighter I work with who is a heavyweight. And one of the challenges he had was when he committed to a punch, and this happens more with heavyweights than with lightweights, is that when you commit to a punch and your whole body and all your weight goes into it and you don't make contact, it's a really, now you think about that, how that feels, is that all of a sudden your body's going in one direction and you're not meeting the wall or the other person that you're trying to strike. And now you have momentum in a direction that you don't want to go. How do you recover from that? And those are the kind of really interesting, specific questions that I love, and that I love to be able to put into training and put into practice, depending on the athlete or the first responder or the vet that I have in front of me.
You get into the mechanics of it, or you're talking about the cycle, the idea of, because I talk a lot about recovery time, and if you improve perception speed, you decrease reaction time, but that's all part of this umbrella of if I miss here, I'm off balance emotionally, psychologically, and physically. We have a maxim. We go, until you're emotionally and psychologically in control of yourself and then physically dominating your opponent, don't transition to complex motor skills. This is for like violent encounters, street defense, because a lot of people, what they're trying to deploy is the move that they practiced, but the move that they practice is out of context. The move they practice was in a laboratory environment, and they're not. It doesn't embrace the totality of the circumstances in the street.
And there's mats on the ground.
Right. Well, there's that, right? And there's a cup and a mouth guard and all that stuff. So let me ask you a couple more questions because I will get you back on the show because there's so much shit that we can talk about. I wanted to ask you. I think we covered. I specifically want. Do you get asked a lot about the other breathing methodologies? Because you're, and do you have, obviously you've got the professional, polite, answer, but you're transparent and honest. Because the breathing that you do, like on one of, I have one of your audios that I love doing this. Part of my training is I'll put that the audio on, and you're very specific in the beginning where you say mouth breathing only, and I will tell you when, and then you can then it's shooter's choice. Okay, if you want to nose breathe for this section, down regulate, whatever. So talk to me just a little bit about mouth versus nasal.
Sure. And first of all, is that I am collaborative. I mean, I refer, whenever somebody takes a class with me, I say, don't just take one with me, take every single class you can possibly find out there, because you're going to learn something from other people. I have a specialty. It's very specific. So I don't profess to know, anything really outside of what my specialty is, but go and take other classes. There are fantastic people out there. You mentioned two people I really love, Eric Goodman, and I adore Brian McKenzie and his group. Absolutely fantastic people. Andy Galpin. Just there's great stuff out there. Is go out and try everything, because you may not like it, but you'll learn something about it. And even if it's learning a new word or a new posture, a new movement, why not? Why not continue? So look, now I've even forgotten the question. Sorry. Nose versus mouth.
It was nasal versus mouth, and
so you should be breathing with your nose. I mean, that's why it's there. That's why we have it. Even though, it's interesting. I always look at primitive man. My brother's an anthropologist, so I look to see. I don't know enough about evolution and anthropology, but I do look to see how primitive man was breathing, how we're breathing. Eric Goodman talks a lot about the hip hinge and how important that is. So breathing through your nose, you should be breathing through your nose. However, again, I'm a psychologist, so I look to see what's going to make it easiest for you to learn. And you need as many cues, like you said, kinesthetic cues as possible. And sometimes hearing the breath coming out of your mouth, right, and hearing it from, I don't know, I'm sure I don't have the right term, but your ears on the outside of your body, not just how you can hear yourself breathe on the inside, is going to help you change a habit that has maybe 10, 20, or 30 years of dismantling that you want to do.
50, yeah. 50.
Psychological in that, yes.
Well, I want to add also, if I can interject here, as an athlete, I can PR my breath with my mouth open. Does that make sense? Like there's a limit, because and also, I've had my nose cracked a couple of times. So like I've got issues breathing clearly through, as far as pathways and stuff like that. But I found that when I did any exercise where I was breathing through my mouth, in terms of, I felt a much better kinesthetic perception to expand ribs back, or to direct my mind. So I think, once again, it was breathing through the mouth was a tool. It wasn't the choice of this or that.
Exactly. And that's perfect, because you have to think about it that I'm coming from a place where I have someone who has a deeply ingrained habit that's also encouraged by culture. We're encouraged to breathe vertically. It doesn't work for us. It's bad for us. And I'm trying to dismantle that and make the process one where they get engaged and they feel empowered. So the mouth breathing is only so that they can hear themselves, feel the breath on their lips, and it adds another element of kinesthetic awareness.
Yeah, and I do think, and I'll put this in here so it doesn't come from you, reiterate it again, is that just for me personally, just with my body, my injuries, my sinusitis, whatever the hell it is that if, and these aren't actual numbers, folks, but if I take a really full breath with my nose, I can do 10, and if I do it with my mouth, I can do 12.5. Whatever the numbers, I feel like I can gather more energy and force when I use my mouth. Also, in terms of connecting with Eric's work, I can activate more of those proprioceptive, the muscles around my spine and my back, using my mouth. Just for some reason, there's just I feel there's a better kinesthetic connection between breath and expansion and so on and so forth. So,
and I have to tell you, one of the Brian says this is that we already have a built-in inspiratory muscle trainer. It's called your nostrils.
Right.
So they limit how much breath you have, and you have to actually pull in. You have to work a little harder to pull air in. So it's already built into our bodies. We should use it. But
right.
In general, humans are terrifically lazy. We're always looking for the easy way out. And sometimes it is just dropping your mouth and breathing out of your mouth. So you should not be breathing through your mouth. If you do, figure it out. There's a lot of people who can help you with switching over your nose. But for the learning part, from the psychological, getting that feeling of expanding in your body, in the beginning, it's mouth for me. Yeah.
Nice. I dig it. Okay. So how do people get in touch with you? The classic close of a podcast is what's the best way for our listeners to find you?
You can, you know what? I got caught off guard because last week I had somebody ask me what my favorite, he asked me what my favorite documentary was. And I hadn't thought about that. I'm always halfway through a couple documentaries, and I just got stuck because there was so many in my mind. So thank you for not throwing me off balance on that one. But Instagram, because you have to start with Instagram, is Dr. Belisa. My website is The Breathing Class. I'm not fancy, just The Breathing Class. And
very tricky title. How will people ever remember that?
So complex.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll put the links in the show notes on the stuff. And you have classes, courses, affiliates. How does somebody learn this stuff without, just Instagram and website? Can they get to live training?
Yeah, you can. You can make appointments with me. I have folks around the world who can train you or do Skype sessions with you, and I tend to, with a podcast like this or anything else that I've done, is just give away the information. I want you to be able to breathe with your diaphragm. I don't want you to breathe with your shoulders. And most of the stuff that's out there will give you everything that's in the book. If you feel like buying the book, that's great. If you feel like getting it from your library, even better. If your library doesn't have one, please let me know. I will send them one. I'm big on public libraries.
Nice.
And yeah, thank you for having me. This was great fun.
This is fun, and I have your book, and I also downloaded. It's on audio, right? I'm not losing my mind. Yeah. I'm just so busy these days. I love just listening to stuff, but the audio is really, really useful, and I love that that it's you on the audio. I hate books. It really drives me crazy when someone just hires a random speaker, and there's just there's no connection to the material, so
unless it's Barry White. I think it'd be really nice to have my book read by Barry White.
Well, could be. Okay. Thank you so much. It was great catching up, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, love. Have a great day.
Bye. Thanks.